Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's E2E event in partnership with IWG PLC. A huge thank you to IWG and in particular to the UK Chief Executive Richard Morris for his huge support of E2E and our members. This is the latest in the E2E Unfiltered series with networking.
Yes, but I'm ready. I can go anytime.
Can I ask everyone to mute themselves, please? If you're watching, if you wouldn't mind to mute yourself, that would be great. So this is the latest in the Unfiltered E2E series with networking, enabling our community to hear the great speakers and interact socially in small groups. And we're using Chatham House rules today. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Shalini Kemkar. I'm the founder and the Chief Executive of E2E, and today we will hear and question a formidable, and I mean a formidable, trio of business leaders and business thinkers. They are Will Page, he's the former Chief Economist at Spotify and the budding author of his book, which is called Tarzan Economics, the 8 Principles of Pivoting Through Disruption. Will, thank you very much for joining us. We also have Lord Vaizey. Very privileged to have Lord Vaizey join us today. He is now a tech and a venture fund advisor. He's a member, as many of you will know, of the House of Lords, and he is the culture minister. He was formerly the Minister for Culture and Digital Minister. So he had a very long stint at changing the way that we do business. So I'd like to say, Lord Vaizey, thank you for the great work that you did during your time. And we have Ralph Simon, an innovator in the music industry and the mobile and entertainment industries. He is the founder and the chief executive of Mobillion Global. So we have 3 formidable people joining us to speak. Although the theme of this evening is surviving the dangers of digital disruption, it also speaks to the wider issue, I think, of technological disruption. Quite apart from the natural level of technological change, which seems to accelerate in every single decade, over the past year we have experienced the disruption of the COVID pandemic, which, according to a number of industry sources, has accelerated, and I think hopefully many of you will agree, accelerated digitization of our economy by nearly 4 to 6 years, or even more than that. The result is an economy where the digital winners and the losers, both in terms of different sectors, but where we have both winners and losers, but also companies within the same sector, such as the retailing industry. So I'd just like to mention, for example, in retailing in a bricks and mortar business, we have companies like Amazon that have excelled, and other companies like Arcadia who have gone through a lot of difficulty. I hope this evening can shed some light on the aspects of change and the digital divide, the competition and new winners that we face, the strategies needed for all of those left behind to close the gap, as well as the role of government in an accelerated digital future. And we will talk to Lord Vaizey around some of the things that the government has done in the past, and hopefully he will be able to enlighten us on what's going to be happening in the future. Sage advice from people with deep experience has never been so needed, in my view. So, if you're an entrepreneur facing the challenges of business, disruption at these difficult times, especially digital disruption, this evening is the perfect opportunity to tap into some of the smartest people in business. So, before I take you through the format and some of the housekeeping, could I please request that you all keep your cameras on? As I mentioned earlier, please switch off your mics. And then when we do the Q&A, so we want the session to be interactive. When we do the Q&A, please do put on your mics and ask your question of our speakers. We'd also like this evening to be interactive in other ways. We're going to have a breakout session in the last half an hour. And the idea of the breakout session is really to group people together and keep you connected and to talk about some of your challenges. The chat function can also be used. So if you didn't want to go live and you just want to put your questions in the Q&A, please do use the chat function. So now, without further ado, I'd like to take you through the format of the next 90 minutes. So after I've spoken, I'm going to hand over to Richard Morris, the Chief Executive of IWG PLC, which hopefully you all know is the International Workplace Group. It's the world's largest workspace solutions provider, and we have a privileged partnership with them, which Richard will talk about. Following that, I'll introduce Will Page, Lord Vaizey, and Ralph Simon. Ralph is kindly going to be interviewing Lord Vaizey and Will. After the interview, we'll do a short poll for literally 2 to 3 minutes before we go into the breakout sessions. So, for those of you who are new and you don't know about E2E, very quickly, E2E is Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur Exchange. We are all about enabling extraordinary entrepreneurship, and we're here to really help you grow your businesses. I like to describe us, as many of you might know, as a match.com for business. So if you want to meet the right people, have access to human capital, technology, and corporate services, we're the company that that is supporting scale-up entrepreneurs. And all of this, as many of you hopefully will agree with me, we do at mates rates. We continue to offer complimentary membership, and we offer membership for those who want to avail the £24,000 of free services on the premium membership. So if you're an entrepreneur looking to scale and you're not a member, we welcome you on either of those two memberships. So I'd like to hand over, if I may, to Richard Morris and thank him again for the partnership that we have with IWG. So Richard, over to you.
Shalini, thank you very much for that. Good evening, everybody. Hope you're all well. As Shalini said, just a few minutes from me, if that's okay. First of all, want to say that we're very proud of our partnership. The partnership between International Workplace Group and E2E is probably 5 years old now, if not a little bit longer. And we think that what we do, which is provide this sort of infrastructure of high quality, conveniently located workspace all around the UK and around the world, we think that sort of works well with the idea of this vibrant, diverse network of entrepreneurs that Shalini described. A little bit about International Workplace Group. We are a provider of flexible workspace. We didn't quite realize how relevant that would become just over a year ago from where we sit today. Certainly now we live in a very different world when it comes to thinking about how people work and how companies will go about providing workspace. The pandemic and the emergency that created a forced global work from home experiment. Our view is that will really leave an indelible mark and change how people work forever. And what we're seeing across our network of on-demand workspaces is this shift in demand for office space, movement out of city centres into smaller towns and suburbs closer to where people want to live. And we think the way that how that will evolve is really something called hybrid working, where for forever now, the practice previously of people working every day or most days from a company office that might be in a central business district or a city centre, that will change. People will work sometimes from home, sometimes work at home, maybe occasionally get together with their colleagues in a company head office. So, what we're doing is building our network of on-demand workspace. Today, that's 3,500 locations in 120 countries, 1,500 cities. In the UK, it's 100 towns and cities, 400 locations. All can be accessed at the tap of a button on a smartphone. Download the Regis app. You can hire workspace by the hour, by the week, or however long you need. The whole idea is that we're responding to this shift in how companies go about fulfilling their workspace needs. We're developing our network, growing it all of the time to respond to this shift and trend for flexibility. In the UK, we operate a number of different brands. They include Space, Base Point, Regis, Clubhouse, Central Working, HQ, Signature. It's a multi-brand network, a little bit like something like Intercontinental Hotels Group, different formats for different customers, different preferences. But the idea is it's very accessible, easy to use. As I say, you can get it at the touch of a button. In the UK, in fact, 90% of the population is within 20 minutes of one of our workspaces, and we're here to sort of serve the economy and the country as we get back to a method of working that does involve some physical contact with other people. One of the great things about our partnership with E2E is that we provide some special offers that are unique to E2E members, can only be accessed by signing up to E2E. And the offer is very simple. We provide members with 3 months free on any of our products or services, as long as you sign up to a minimum term of 6 months. So that's up to a 50% discount for E2E members. We're also providing up to 10% discount on all of our conference facilities, conference venues, and meeting room facilities available to E2E members. And then finally, again, in the spirit of getting people moving again, getting people out of their work from home arrangements, we are providing free to use to E2E members to our business lounges all across the UK. They're located in business parks, town centres, city centres, train stations, airports, shopping malls. You can use those business lounges for free for the next 6 months. So do please take the opportunity to come along, and we look forward to welcoming you. That's all from me. Thank you for listening. I'll hand back to Shalini now.
Richard, thank you. It's brilliant to see how things are changing. And what was very interesting, I was reading in the press recently with IWG, some of the big, large corporates like Standard Chartered, they're kind of closing up their head offices and they're moving into flexible working spaces. So it's very, we'll talk about disruption, but the whole workplace environment is being disrupted at the moment as well. So it's great to have you on board. And Richard, thank you for the support to our members and to us. So it's now my great pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce our guests for this evening. As I mentioned, Will Page. I'll begin with Will Page. Will Page is one of the innovators and great minds in the digital space and the economics of the music business. Will's new book, and I love the title. I'm just going to grab it actually to show you. I don't know if he's got a copy. Can you see it? No, probably not. Can't see it. Maybe, Will, you can show it later, but I love the way it looks and feels. So his new book is called Tarzan Economics, The 8 Principles for Pivoting Through Disruption, which is going to be released on the 1st of April. He's chosen April Fool's Day, which provides a framework for any individual, an organization, or a business which seeks to prosper in the current economic turmoil and draws upon lessons from major corporates such as Starbucks, Tupperware, and even Groucho Marx. So before joining Spotify, Will was the chief economist for the UK's largest collection society, PRS for Music. He's a graduate, and there's a lot of Scottish people on. He's a graduate of Scotland's University of Strathclyde and the University of Edinburgh. Will is a visiting fellow at the London School of Economics and a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and a non-exec director for Soundvault Limited, which is a music licensing and royalty tracking platform. Will works regularly and is featured in publications such as Billboard, The Economist, and most recently I've read some great articles from him in the Financial Times. So it's also now my huge pleasure to introduce our second guest, which is Lord Vaizey. As I mentioned earlier, a former government minister and now a member of the House of Lords. So Lord Vaizey, congratulations for your appointment as a Lord very recently. As I mentioned earlier, in his role as digital minister, Lord Vaizey managed the successful rollout of the Rural Broadband Programme and the introduction of 4G and tax credits for films, television, animation and video games. And he worked heavily in the private sector to support the private sector. That's why I was saying that a lot of the credit in terms of the technological and digital change happened during his tenure as digital minister. Lord Vaizey is an advisor to a range of ventures, including Liontree, which is a leading global M&A advisory firm specializing in TMT. For those of you that don't know TMT, technology, media, and telecommunications, and an advisor to the Technology and Media and Telecoms advisor to the board of FTI Consulting. He's a visiting professor at King's College, London, and Newcastle University, and serves as a trustee on the National Youth Theatre. However, his lasting claim to fame was his role in helping to persuade Lucasfilms to make the new Star Wars film in the UK. So thank you for that, Lord Vaizey. And as proof, he received an on-screen credit in his first film of the series. It's hard now, I think, to top that. So Ralph, I'm going to introduce you. And Ralph Simon, I'm also delighted to have with us this evening. Ralph Simon, who's very kindly agreed to interview Will and Lord Vaizey, is in our next segment. Ralph is the founder and the chief executive of Mobilium Global Limited and has a wide-ranging and successful career in music publishing, artist management, mobile entertainment, and the mobile technology and innovation in mobile technology. Ralph co-founded Zomba Group of music companies, which he grew to become a leading independent record label, and then later served as an executive vice president of Capitol Records. So I've just touched on a very short snippet of these gentlemen's bios. I haven't gone into the whole lot because it would take too long. So I'm going to hand over to Ralph to kindly interview Lord Vaizey and Will. Ralph, thank you for doing this. Lord Vaizey, huge thanks, and same to Will. So over to you, Ralph. You're on mute, Ralph.
Great, thank you very much for that introduction. Lord Vaizey, great to see you. Will, great to see you. The two of you are certainly, you know where all the bodies are buried and where all the money of the future is coming from, and also about the digitization of where things are going in the future. So first of all, Lord Vaizey, I would just like to say, when you were elected into as the Minister of State for Culture and the Digital Economy in 2010, you were also responsible for business innovation and skills, which at the time really was a driving seat that started to lead to a lot of changes and benefits in the UK economy. And going all the way forward to 2017, where you showed that we were the second highest contributor to growth, 72% growth in the British economy versus in the European Union, only 8%. So you really were a massive change agent. Will, of course, with yourself. Here's a copy of the book that Will has just published, Tarzan Economics. And gentlemen, great to meet you, great to see you. And Lord Vaizey, great to see you. Can we just have a word from you, Lord Vaizey?
Hello, Ralph. How are you? It's a pleasure to be here. Ralph is an old friend, so I'm delighted that he's moderating the discussion. You can't go pre-pandemic. You couldn't go to any tech conference anywhere without bumping into Ralph. I've never known such a supreme networker. I've never met Will Page in the flesh, but he has replaced Ralph in the sense that every single webinar I now do is at the invitation of Will Page. But I'm happy to do it because his book, Tarzan Economics, is absolutely phenomenal. It's got all the dinner party anecdotes you need, plus some very, very important insights into business, particularly businesses that are pivoting from analog to digital, because he's seen it happen in the music industry. So there are lessons for business, plus great anecdotes for when you get out into the garden with your 5 significant others to share.
Well, thank you, Lord Vaizey. And Will, welcome to you. It's great to see you here. You were the Chief Economist at Spotify for 7 years. And you also have a background that worked at some point at the Performing Rights Society in London. You also are a DJ in your spare capacity. but you're also a great student of economics. And you've really spent your time in really analyzing what it was like to be the canary in the coal mine. So Will, hello to you. Tell us about your interest in ornithology, but the canary in the coal mine ornithology.
Well, my passion for economics is really not just learning about it, but even more so teaching it to audiences who don't think they're going to understand it, possibly don't want to understand it, but they have to. And that's been brought to me by my father from a very early age, is that ability to get economics across without losing its meaning. And what matters to me in this conversation is that music got there first. We were first into the tunnel of digital disruption. We were the first to suffer, and we're also the first to recover. And I think post-pandemic, many industries, many institutions are staring at their Napster moment. So hopefully this conversation will allow us to transfer some meaningful messages to those being affected too.
Very good. Well, let's get straight into it. Will, in your book, you've got 8 principles that you're covering in your book. And over the next 20 minutes or so, we'll touch on about 4 of these. The attention economy, a very big thing, particularly for business people and entrepreneurs, to understand what it is and what it's like, make or buy, and the value of ideas and creativity. These are things, of course, that Lord Vaizey knows very well about. And over the 4 election successes that Lord Vaizey had when he was running for Parliament in 2005, 2010, 2015, 2017, and then having a real strong interest in this whole world. So, Ed, if we may pose the first question to you. The market for startups is getting increasingly crowded, with startups seeking to raise funds and scale businesses. How can you give us any pointers as to how E2E members stand above the noise?
Well, it is a crazy marketplace, and I'm probably the last person to give advice because I didn't buy any shares in Facebook, Amazon, Tesla, or anyone else at the beginning of the pandemic. Really, I should have, if I had any business sense at all, I would have retired. Today, I'll be announcing my retirement. I looked at the enormous size of my ISAs or whatever. Or equally, I should have started a startup. And probably by now, I would have put it into a SPAC for several $1 billion. But I didn't do that either. But in my experience working with companies like LionTree, who do look at early stage tech, as well as Edge Investments, who invest in early stage tech, some basic principles stand out. One is very unhelpful, which is introductions. So I send business plans the way of LionTree and Edge, but I send them from people that I know or have a connection to. So I'm afraid it is that slightly old-fashioned thing of who you know counts as much as what you know. I'm not saying that you need to have gone to the same school, which you would obviously have had to do if you wanted to be a Tory MP, but you do need to have some connection, I think, which might help people take a look. And the second thing I think is having an outstanding team. And again, it's difficult if you're a relatively young person, even though we tend to think of startups as being started by people straight out of school or university. Having people with experience and a track record always stands out. And in my investing experience, people look at the team as much as they look at the business plan. So those are the 2 things that make you stand out, apart from obviously having a standout idea. And finally, I would say the startups that have really impressed me are people whose Excel spreadsheet is much longer when it comes to looking at the potential investors in their company than it is for their business plan. People who really, really understand the marketplace. So they know that when they're approaching either angels or seed investors or venture capital, they're approaching people with a track record in their space or an understanding of their area, and they aren't wasting their time. And showing that kind of extensive knowledge of the people who you're asking to invest in your company is always supremely impressive. So it takes almost as much work, probably more actually, to raise your investment as it does to start your business.
Thank you, Ed. Let's go to Will. Will, tell us a bit about the attention economy and this as an issue and its contestability.
So, I mean, Ed's given you a great answer there in terms of how tech companies can stand above the crowd. And when I think about an increasingly crowded market, what it takes to stand above it, I'm thinking about how do you win attention? It's a chapter in my book called Paying Attention, which the very title's of interest. In English, in the English language, we say paying attention. If you look at other languages in Europe, it's offer, share, or give attention. We use the currency language of paying, which is interesting. But I think attention is fascinating. I mean, it's binary, either you have it or you don't, or it's stackable. You can have many forms of attention being competed for at the same time. You could be playing with Instagram whilst listening to music, for example. But I would like to offer maybe a framework of thinking about attention, both from a tech company trying to seek consumers, but also trying to seek the attention of investors. So if you think about the contestability of attention and you look at the Netflix business model, when they've got my attention, it means no one else has it. Now, forgive me, because I'm late to the party. I've only just started watching the drama Breaking Bad. I've just finished season 2. I hear it gets better there on in. But if I'm going to dedicate the next 10 hours of my media time to catching up on Breaking Bad so I can lose my insecurity of not being able to discuss this drama with my friends, that's 10 hours Netflix gets that no one else wins. No music service, no social media network, no video service. Netflix wins, everyone else loses, which means there's even less time for the rest of us to compete for. It's monopolizing attention. I think that's fascinating in terms of how you get these monopolists of attention where they win, so everyone else loses. There's a wealth of information and a scarcity of attention competing for it. And that's a really important point to think about with your product and how it engages with the consumer. Is it monopolizing attention, or is it stackable attention? Is it gin and tonic with other forms, or is it different brands of gin competing for the same amount of time? Then to the investor, I was introduced to Ed Vaizey's podcast, The Vaizey View, when he interviewed Benedict Evans. It's just fascinating to look at what Benedict Evans has done with his journalism. You know, if your company could get highlighted in his newsletter, then you've just got yourself to 168,000 avid readers who click on every link that he offers. We know this because we see his data. So when he interviewed Benedict Evans, it really became apparent to me, which is, here's a brilliant mind with a laptop and a phone, reaching just short of 200,000 people, perhaps even more now on Twitter. And because we dedicate our time to him, we're not dedicating our time to things like the Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal. And that's interesting in terms of which audience do you need to play for, a real quality versus quantity trade-off there. So just to be aware of those influencers, Benedict Evans, Ben Thompson, these types of people who have built niche audiences of avid listeners to every word they're saying, could matter way more in terms of your strategy to get awareness with investors than getting to the BBC, the FT, or the Wall Street Journal.
So, Will, would you give us some kind of explanation of what it takes to draw a crowd? Because traditionally, governments and corporations were really, I would say, the top-down judges who determined how the crowds were that were drawn. Are consumers now so empowered that the attention economy that they determine is how the crowds are drawn? Give us some sense of how you see that from your rockonomics standpoint.
When you use the term judges, it does make me think of Simon Cowell, not just as a judge on any number of the talent shows, but also back in the 90s, he judged that Robson and Jerome had talent. I disagree with that personally, but that judgment led to 7 million CDs being sold across the British population for somebody who couldn't sing. Still, he was the judge, he was the jury, he had a top-down view of this is going to be a hit, and the fans responded to that view, and it became a hit. I think that's been turned on its head now. I think now we've got a situation where it's bottom up. The consumer becomes the new broadcaster. If you think back to John Maynard Keynes, the great economist in the 1930s, he once talked about the beauty contest paradox, where you're at a beauty contest and you're looking at the 10 models on stage and you have to choose which one do you think the judges will decide as the winners. Now, do you make that judgment in your own opinion? I think beauty contest model number 2 will be the winner. Or do you make that judgment in the judge's opinion? I think the judges will go for model number 4. And if we're all basing our views on the judges, then that hands the power to the gatekeeper. But now the consumer is empowered with all of this social media, all of this interactive on-demand engagement, they become the judges. So if you look at the hits that are coming through today, Billie Eilish, discovered on SoundCloud by her fans, long before the record label came in and signed her. If you look at Lewis Capaldi, again, discovered on social media first, signed by the record label second. So I think what's fascinating here in terms of drawing a crowd is it's a bottom-up model that we're adjusting to. Consumers are the new broadcasters, they become the new judges, not the broadcast top-down model that we've been used to for the past 70 years.
Ed, Lord Vaizey, one of the things that is evident in what Will is saying and also what you say is there seems to be this really deep marriage now between creativity and technology. And I know this is an area you're particularly interested in, both when you were a minister in the government and now that you're a Privy Council member and also member of the House of Lords. And you've always looked at this marriage between creativity and technology, which is driving so much forward of the British economy, British creativity, British sensibilities.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I had a very odd job title in the sense that I was both the Minister of Culture looking after, our national museums and our opera houses and our theatres, and the Minister for Technology, so dealing with big tech like Facebook and Google, but also our kind of getting our startup economy going. But I always used to say that, and in fact, I got the job by accident. I mean, my political career has been a series of accidents and catastrophes. So when I arrived in Downing, I mean, David Cameron has a lot to answer for. He's a good friend of mine, but he never quite took me seriously. And when I arrived in my department, they tried to take away my industry responsibilities for telecoms and the creative industries. But luckily, they gave it to a guy who was married to the chief executive of TalkTalk. So he had to give it straight back. So David Cameron, who clearly thought I couldn't run a bath, was forced to allow me to be responsible for broadband rollout. So he may have been right, and I failed to deliver on broadband. Anyway, that's another story. But the point is that I then had to sort of construct a narrative about why these two things should be put together. And of course, the narrative is obvious, and it's sitting in front of you, and it's called Will Page, the Rockonomist, which is that the use case for all this technology is creativity. Now, of course, the back office, the back room, the cloud, pipes, the fiber is a feat of amazing engineering. But we're not going to use that stuff except really to consume. Now, we're on a Zoom call at the moment, and that's a kind of work thing. But broadly speaking, we'll be watching Netflix when this is over. We might listen to our Spotify when we go for our lockdown run tomorrow morning. This thing in our hands is all based on great design principles. The reason I pay so much for this phone as opposed to another one is because of the way it's designed. So there is this amazing link between technology and creativity, which is fundamental and very, very important. And there are 2 points that stem from this. The first is off on a tangent, and I won't go very far down it, the importance of great design and creativity. No business, since we're talking to entrepreneurs and we were talking earlier about how to stand out from a crowd, no business should neglect wonderful design. And it is what makes you stand out from the crowd. And people are fond of saying that, and they make the point that China doesn't envy us our manufacturing capacity, it envies our creativity. That's the magic dust that they want. And that's my second point, which is Britain is in a relatively unique position. Will hit you with the statistics about how much we export about music and so on. But we are one of the few countries in the world, net exporters of publishing, music and so on, where creativity is sort of built into our economy. It's a massive competitive advantage, which I spent years as a minister trying to move up the food chain in Whitehall. And I think to a certain extent we succeeded. But it is useful for politicians and for people at the top of their businesses to be thinking about the importance of creativity, great design that makes your business stand out from a crowd and makes the British economy is part of the magic dust that powers the British economy.
So just interesting because creativity really is the plasma that makes the vascular system of a modern economy and a digital economy work so well. Will, one of the key principles that you have in pivoting through disruption, as you've laid out in Tarzan Economics, and by the way, wasn't Tarzan the character that was created by William Rice Burroughs, the famous author in California, how many years ago? 90 years ago?
No, not 90 years. Very important. He died 70 years ago, which means he's now public domain. So no lawyer can catch me for the title.
Oh, very good. Well, very good. So one of your key principles in pivoting through disruption is how to balance make or buy decisions. Do you go it alone? or do you work with intermediaries? How can E2E and E2E's members and those of you that are watching this particular session learn from the music business's recovery and the recovery journey to solve this pivotal conundrum?
So I think make or buy is just one of those, perennial questions that we all face. When do you go it alone? And when do you get to a point of scale in your career, in your adventure, where you need to cede control to an intermediary? That question's been asked in the past. That question will always be asked in the future. And as music got there first in terms of dealing with disruption, I think there's some important lessons to learn. In the book, I talk about the story of Radiohead going it alone in 2007, leaving their record label, leaving their collecting society, and just going with their management company and bringing their product, the 10 songs that comprised of In Rainbows, to market. But there's other more relevant developments happening today. I mean, if you look at the growth of the independent record label sector as a result of streaming, you can see how streaming has democratized access, and the little guys managed to get more market share as a result. The independent labels have never had the market share that they've had under streaming today. But it's not just labels, it's artists who choose to do it alone as well. I give you a statistic to work around here. Last year, the major record labels released 1.2 million songs onto streaming platforms around the world. That's a lot of music, 1.2 million. DIY artists using platforms such as DistroKid, TuneCore, AWOL, Glasgow's own EMU bands released 9.5 million songs. So that's a ratio of 8-to-1 of artists doing it themselves, as opposed to labels doing it for them. And it's not just doing it yourself that I'm saying, which I think is a transferable lesson for the audience. It's the creator tools that are available, like such as SoundBetter, a creator tool which is almost like a LinkedIn for music production. Find me someone who can master Ed Vaizey's vocal track. It sounds terrible, he can't sing. Give me somebody who can master it and make it sound like he can sing. It worked for Robson Jerome, which would work for Ed Vaizey. So, you can use those tools to build what you need, to build a team that you need to take your product to market and not need to cede control to intermediary. The last point I want to make is a really important one, because since looking at this development, I've learned a really important lesson. It's blatantly obvious, but you need to remind yourself of it, which is there are all these creator tools available in music. There are all these tools available in tech, which allow you to do it yourself more. But it's only those who choose to go it alone who make use of them. I'll give you a quick example. I'm learning by doing. I'm a first-time author, never published a book before. Doubt I'll ever publish one again. This journey's been so arduous, but still, I asked the team at Amazon, I spoke to the head of Amazon Books, do you offer tools for authors? Lots of tools, amazing tools. Wow, I've never heard of that. I went through a publisher, Simon & Schuster, and he said to me this, he said, only the authors who decide to self-publish are aware of and make use of these tools. Anyone who chooses an intermediary is completely unaware of them. That's a fascinating development I think we're seeing across technology in terms of when do you go it alone and when do you bring in the support of others.
So Will, here's something to give us food for thought. Britain has just on 1% of the world population, and yet we sell 12% of the world's music. When the music business went into such crisis 12 to 15 years ago, and people were very worried about piracy and how it was going to stunt all level of creative development, and particularly finance and all of the different elements that feed the economy, live entertainment, music publishing, the development of copyrights, songs that would last for years and would stand the test of cultural time. What was it that led people to understand that the music industry was a canary in a coal mine? And by getting streaming to happen, just give us a sense of what you saw with Spotify and streaming and how that particular battle managed to change things to the point where there was suddenly a new salvation. And tell us about the new figures that just came out last week, where you showed the value of a copyright is now greater than it's ever been before in history.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Britain is proud of its creative past. Yeah, Ed alluded to this point. We're one of only 3 countries which are net exporters of music in the world, the other 2 being America, which is obvious, and Sweden, which is less obvious, and less to do with ABBA and more to do with a great legacy of Swedish songwriters. So we have this proud cultural heritage. Go back 10 years, we were worried about its existence. Was it going to die off because of piracy? I think what Spotify was able to do and what streaming enabled a consumer to do is to carry on doing what they were doing under piracy, but monetize activity. Consumption was not the problem under piracy. Monetization was. People were going to the internet in 1999, visiting Napster, getting any song they wanted. Today, they pay to go to the internet, visit Spotify, compensate creators, and still get any song they wanted. So the consumer experience hasn't actually changed that much. The business experience has been turned on its head to accommodate this new demand from the customer. That's the important thing. Where are we now? Well, last week I published on my own website, tarzaneconomics.com, the global value of music copyright, which essentially adds the whole business together. That comes to 31.6 billion, and that is the highest it's ever been in recorded music history. So we're now setting new heights thanks to this model of streaming. Streaming makes up just about half of that entire 31.6 billion pie. So it's an incredible story. And just to say, set the path ahead, there's 8 billion people on this planet. Not many of them don't like music. I think quite a lot of them are going to engage in streaming over the next 20 years.
So Ed, here's a question for you. When you arranged for tax credits to become reality in the UK, and getting tax credits for theatre, for orchestras, for museums, for television, for video effects, and video games, we've got a situation today where video games are 4.5 times bigger than the global movie business. What's your sense about that kind of creativity and how that's manifested in the UK?
So I've unmuted myself. It's an interesting question, and I'll answer it in sort of several different ways. One is from the policymaker's perspective, the politician's perspective. So politicians hate tax credits, or at least conservative politicians in the UK hate tax credits. And when I first became the minister, we only had the tax credit for the film industry. And I was told by a Treasury minister, we'd like to abolish this because they felt it was a kind of unfair subsidy. And intellectually, I could agree with that. But the fact is, it's a highly, highly competitive and mobile industry. And Australia had tax credits, Canada has tax credits, lots of US states have tax credits. So if you want to compete, you need tax credits. And we compete on talent and, the set designers, camera people, and so on. So we have all the talent in the UK. People want to make films in the UK, but at the end of the day, it's a financial decision. So we needed tax credits. And but then I tried to get them for video games because Canada had introduced a tax credit for video games, and the UK had started life as a world leader in video games. I think we've invented that ping pong video game back in the 70s. And George Osborne, in his first budget, went out of his way to say some people have recommended we should have a video games tax credit. I think that's a disastrous and stupid idea. So it took me 4 years to talk him round. But by the end of it, George Osborne was addicted to tax credits because he saw the amazing impact they had on the creative industries. And it meant that the film industry, even today, you'll have seen the film industry figures from the British Film Institute for 2020 show that more than £1 billion was spent in the UK during the pandemic on making films. There was one quarter in 2019 where we avoided recession because of the contribution of the British film industry. And so you've got games, TV, and theatre, and so on, all of which is fantastic. But the video games industry in particular is an interesting one. I knew nothing about it when I came across it as a minister. And the only engagement in video games that politicians had had before then was to have debates about how video games led to the creation of serial killers. And I discovered this industry that was both a cottage industry and a multinational industry, and was present in every major town and city in the UK, from Dundee down to Bristol, which required people to have quite high-powered computer science degrees and physics degrees, as well as art degrees. What a fantastic industry to support. And as you point out, Ralph, it is now bigger than music, film, and television combined. And
that's right.
We have this terrible relationship with technology from a policymaker's perspective, where we're suspicious and we're wondering what's going wrong. But if your kid is upstairs or your grandchild is upstairs playing on a video game, they're playing with the technology that is going to dominate their lives as they enter adulthood. So, if they go into the armed forces, they're going to be flying drones, or they're probably going to be interacting in their workspace using games technology. If they're teachers, they'll probably be using games technology. This is massive, massive business. And it's a very good example, again, talking to the entrepreneurs in the room, of the crossover. If you're thinking about a business which could be a routine business of selling clothes, think about the creative industries, think about games, and think about how people play games, and see whether that is a way of engaging with your customers. So it's a massively fertile area. I haven't quite answered your question, Ralph, but I've just gone on and on about how policymakers have consistently missed the point about these industries.
I know it's really interesting because obviously British productions like Bridgerton, the film that was on Netflix, got 7.5 billion views. But you'd mentioned Dundee in Scotland as a great place for the development of games. Grand Theft Auto, a hugely selling game, was created there. In London, Candy Crush, a mobile game, which really was very, very prominent for mobile phones. But Ed, here's a question for you. Will has argued that ideas in our heads are more than the roofs above them. Intellectual property is now worth more than real estate. What do you think is needed to try and keep ahead in the ideas business, to drive E2E's members and their businesses?
So Ed, I'm going to leave you to think about that for 1 second, because I'm going to ask everyone to answer the poll questions whilst you're thinking about that, Lord Vaizey. And Ralph, if it's okay, we'll do the poll, and then I want to bring all our members in to ask their questions as well, because we've got about 15 minutes. So quickly, I'm going to ask you guys to have a look at the poll. Please do take a second, because we really appreciate the feedback to answer it. I won't go through the questions, I'll let it run. Whilst Lord Vaizey, if you wouldn't mind to answer that brilliant question put forward by Ralph.
So, intellectual property underpins the success of a lot of businesses. And we are lucky in the UK, we have a robust intellectual property regime, and we take intellectual property very, very seriously, and copyright very, very seriously. And it's interesting, the kind of advent of tech has been a real challenge to that system, as it were, which has been around since the early 18th century. And when I first became a minister, you had the Pirate Party and so on, and you had this kind of information must be free mantra, and it was it's disgraceful that people hold on to copyright. And there's a happy medium to be had. And weirdly, Spotify encompasses that, because obviously we had Napster. When I first became a minister, we had very tough legislation which effectively criminalized teenagers. You were, in theory, meant to write letters to teenagers saying, you've ripped off a song, we're going to fine you £10,000 and possibly put you in prison. What Spotify did, what pirates do, and this is a slightly controversial thing to say, is pirates are sort of canaries down the mine. Pirates show where there is consumer demand, and it's then up to legitimate businesses to fill that space. And that's what Spotify did. And to a certain extent, that is what Netflix is doing. The reason I think, for a start, that we haven't quite had the same piracy problem with film, some people would argue that we do, but it doesn't feel like it, is partly because of bandwidth and bad broadband, but mainly because these streaming services have come ahead of the game. And you'll see it again with the narrowing of the exhibition window between cinemas and streaming services, where the consumer will get their content as they see fit. But it is a two-sided coin. Yes, you need to protect intellectual property, but equally, those who own intellectual property need to continually innovate to deliver it to consumers in a way consumers want to receive it.
So, Will, here's a question for you with your Spotify background. Spotify pivoted towards bringing in podcasts because they recognize that in the attention economy, you've got to get people paying attention. It's like Apple saying, let's get into the electric car business, because then Apple will have someone in a car in their digital environment. Give us your sense about podcasts and the attention and how that keys into some of the key principles in your book, Tarzan Economics.
I think podcasts, do bring back the concept of attention economics. If we're all walking down Oxford Street on a busy day, post-pandemic that is, listening to music, we can all navigate our way past, because music is a passive form of consumption in our headphones. Right. I believe that we're all listening to podcasts, we'll be bumping into each other because that's a lean-in form. Get out of my way, I'm learning how to cook Italian meals. It's a different type of listening experience that you have in the podcast. As for where podcasts are right now, it's the Wild West. Nobody knows which way it's going to go. I mean, you have so many fundamental debates, the RSS open distribution model versus a closed exclusive model, which is being advocated by some. Whether podcast catalog is actually worth anything. Do people listen to all podcasts, or are they perishable? We only want to hear what's coming out next. That's another fundamental question. And how we listen. You know, my Apple iPod app says I download every episode. I only listen to 1 or 2 a year. So, you know, who's actually listening to the content? So there's still a lot to be learned, but I always like to remind myself of one of the biggest challenges with podcasts, and this cannot be said for Ed Vaizey's Vaizey podcast, which I think is absolutely brilliant, but for most of them, they're poorly edited and you don't listen all the way through. So it could be 40, 50 minutes long, but the joke I always have is, what's the best way to keep a secret? Put it in the second half of a podcast, because nobody's going to listen to it. So editorial needs to come to the world of podcasts. It needs to happen soon.
Ralph, I'm going to ask if I can bring in the audience now, please. If anybody would like to ask a question, to simply go ahead, because there's a lot of people. So maybe somebody would like to kick off. I know Dinesh is there. He often has questions on technology. I'm just wondering who would like to kick off. And please raise your hand in the chat function. Otherwise, we've got lots of questions that we can continue with, but it would be nice if anybody would like to challenge anything that Will and Lord Vaizey have been saying.
Sorry, Shalini, I think that what I've heard is, I mean, it chimes with what I know, and of course I've learnt a lot. So I don't have any questions.
That's great. So Dinesh Dhamija, for those of you that don't know him, he founded eBookers. It was pretty much technology that enabled him to build that business. So good to have you on. But anyone like to ask? Because I would like to ask a question of Will, if I may. How far away was Will? I mean, you know, with Starbucks and Tupperware, what were the main lessons you learned there? And how can we use take some of your secret sauce from your learning from Starbucks?
Well, I think the Starbucks story in the book revolves around a song called All About That Bass by Meghan Trainor, where we were struggling to learn what made it a hit. I mean, it blew up on Shazam, which is when you tag a song that you hear on the radio on Shazam and you find out the name of it and add it to your collection. But then after that, it blew up in streaming. Then after that, it blew up on iTunes. And then a long, long time after that, it blew up on radio. So if Shazam moved first, where were the tags coming from? Clearly, it couldn't have been streaming, downloads, or radio, because they came second, third, and fourth. This order of events was what we were wrestling with. And that same order of events is what's affecting technology today as it gets disrupted. So we were spent about a year asking our question of, like, we've published this great case study. Meghan Trainor's become this huge global hit, but, you know, who did the tagging? And about a year after publishing the case study around that particular song, a colleague of mine, Emily Blake, had been to Seattle working with Starbucks on a business venture, like a joint venture over there. And she came back and she said, everybody's going crazy about your case study, Will. It's like, why? They're Starbucks. They sell coffee. They got nothing to do with music. She said, no. If you look at the numbers, Starbucks is the biggest radio station in America. Around 30, 40 million people spend at least half an hour every day queuing, ordering, and slurping what is, in my opinion, god-awful coffee. But still, it's time spent in a coffee shop. And while they're there, they're listening to music. And Starbucks had curated the song Meghan Trainor All About That Bass long before it got to streaming platforms, long before it got to downloads, and months before it got to radio. We went back to Shazam and ran the data, and yeah, the tags all happen between 8 and 10 in the morning, regardless of time zone in America. So if in terms of drawing a crowd, you might think, okay, got a song dropping, need to work playlists, need to work radio, need to work these types of typical marketing outlets. What that story teaches us is crowds can be drawn anywhere and everywhere. They're all relevant. They're all gatherings of people. And if it's Starbucks that draws a crowd, you should be working that angle too.
Thank you very much, Will. That's very, very helpful. I'm just going to encourage, we've got about 70 people online, to make sure you please answer the poll, and then we'll stop it in a couple of minutes. Lord Vaizey, I'm going to come across to you for one further question, which has come through on my WhatsApp. The question is really, do you think the government today is doing a great job in terms of supporting SMEs in terms of their digital requirements, and how much of a part should government be playing in helping SMEs in terms of technology and generally?
So the last budget had an interesting, the last budget was only a few weeks ago, an interesting proposal to allow businesses to claim the cost of digital transformation, getting new applications and so on to digitize their businesses. There's some concern it could be a deadweight cost, and there's also some concern that people are going to end up buying the wrong kind of technology for their business. I haven't quite got into the detail, but there's some dispute about how the scheme is configured and whether people should be buying and renting software and so on that's more suitable for the way business operates today. But so it shows the government's heart is in the right place, but it's always schemes like this are always very difficult and can end up wasting a lot of taxpayers' money. I think the other point about, I would look at it from the other perspective. I think government has been quite successful in digitizing its services. And in terms of dogs that haven't barked, it's interesting to note that things like the furlough scheme and bounce back loans, whether or not there's been a lot of fraud or whatever, technologically speaking, they've worked. People have been able to apply online and get it. And also the massive increase in people getting benefits. I think government needs to really, really lean into the digitization of government services across the piece, from health, justice, all the routine services that we as consumers use, depending on our circumstances, and really lead the way in that respect. But trying to get small business to digitize is a challenge. I represented a constituency which was still predominantly rural, and a lot of people, and this isn't a criticism, they run their businesses to suit their lifestyle. And sometimes, they're not necessarily going to want to have Slack or Teams or Zoom. They just want to run their local business with their local customers, and they don't want to waste their time digitizing. So there is always that challenge.
Yes, absolutely. I think I'd like to bring Robert Kilgarren. He has his hand raised, and then I'm going to follow with Elizabeth. Elizabeth Diaferia. She'd also like to make a point on what you're saying, what both yourself and Will are saying, Lord Vaizey. So Robert, hi, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, Shalini. But you've pretty much asked my question. My question was, particularly of Ed, is what more could and should the current government be doing to help entrepreneurs and SMEs to make better use of technology coming out of COVID? Certainly in my field in healthcare, we're traditionally very slow at engagement and use of technology, but the last year has moved use of technology in healthcare and social care forward about, it feels like 10 years. And we're determined, those of us in this sector, to not fall back to where we were and to drive forward from this raised platform that's been forced on us with the use of technology in the last year, and actually drive forward. But what more could government do to encourage and help us in this regard?
Well, as I say, I think the more it kind of makes digital the default position. I mean, I know that certainly in the NHS, they are very ambitious to get more patients treated at home, for example. And they will announce figures, I think, at the end of this year of how many patients are receiving care at home and being monitored digitally, which will be pretty transformatory.
GP appointments. I mean, Matt Hancock's is very, very keen on that, and that's been transformational. And he's determined that's not going to fall back. It'll fall back a little, but it's not going to fall back to where it was before.
Yeah, exactly. And I think to a certain extent, it's all about the providers as well. GPs are private companies, and they have to be. And there are many small c conservative elements in any system who resist this kind of technology change. But the more you can do it from the center and make the technology as easy as possible to use, the more you will get transformation. But it's very hard in the NHS. We all revere the NHS, but it is a monopoly. And as people point out, the success of Israel in its vaccination program has partly been driven by, although it has a public health service, it has 4 competing public health networks. And trying to get innovation and change in a monopoly is extremely difficult. And there's very little incentive, for example, for one GP surgery to go fully digital and consumer friendly, because they're not going to make more income by effectively closing down their next door neighbor GP surgery. So that's one of the big challenges to digitizing and advancing technology in any sector.
If I can add one thing though, to that point, Lord Vaizey, I think the point about general practice is great. I've seen in my own family, my father's an orthopedic consultant. If you had asked prior to COVID whether he was using email and whether he was having calls with his patients in terms of looking at their medical requirements, he was not doing that. His life has changed during COVID, and the amount of support that all of these surgeons are now giving, not just general practitioners, but also consultants and the whole NHS service. Digitization is happening very, very quickly. And it's been wonderful for me to watch him being able to work from home, thinking that he wouldn't be able to do it. So the point I'm making here is that the change is needed across the sector, and it's already happening.
Absolutely.
And we need to keep pushing that to continue.
Will wants to come in.
Yeah, just a very quick point, which is, I agree with Ed, there's a big turkeys waiting for Christmas point when you try and tackle the question of the monopoly. But in addition, just for a cross-country comparison, the audience would do well to learn what's happened in Estonia. For those who are not aware, they've basically digitized everything in their government, including the kitchen sink, but especially a digitized healthcare network. And to watch how Estonia's reacted to the pandemic, and also in terms of how it's advanced digitized government, it's a fascinating case study to learn from. A potential ETE event in the future as well.
I would love to do that. Thank you very much.
There's a great Vaizey View podcast on Estonia.
Well, okay.
I've got to go back to the physical world, so thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Shalini, it's been real. Yeah. Will is going to carry the whole of the next half hour on his own. Okay. That's the kind of guy he is.
Lord Vaizey,
I want to get Dinesh's overhead projector. That's what I want. One thing I didn't. I got the dumbbells. I got the resistance bands during lockdown, but I didn't get the overhead projector. That's the lockdown project I never followed through on.
Okay, Lord Vaizey, can I say a huge thank you? We've never met in person, but I feel like I know you already because you're so wonderful to chat
and I'm meeting your mother next week. It just gets better and better.
Yes, you are. So she's online, she's listening to you. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll let you have supper with your family now. So
there she is. There's Dame Asha.
Dame Asha is there.
There she is.
So thank you.
Great to see you on the.
I can't just disappear without saying something, Shalini.
Sure,
Yes.
Mama. Go for it.
Lord Vaizey, I have heard so much about you. I'm fascinated to meet you. I'm fascinated also to hear about your mother. And we have to meet very quickly. I was resisting, but now I have to ask, when Shalini has mentioned about my husband, he's also sitting here.
Yes, I can see him, yeah.
Okay.
And when we are talking about digital technology,
yes,
are we going to make our nation, our youth, digitally, technically inclusive? That is the big challenge we have. We talk about other countries, we talk about our own successes, we talk about our businesses, but our future is somewhere else. This is a challenge for the government, and I'm going to talk to you about that challenge when we meet.
That's right. Well, I'm very interested in it, and there are two projects I'm working on which are about that. So that's brilliant. I can't remember what my mother's role in all this is, except she does not have a damehood. She's only got a CBE, and she's furious she's not a dame.
She will be. We will work on that plan with you.
Yes, it's never too late.
It's never too late.
Okay, well, thank you, Lord Vaizey.
Shalini. Thank you for supporting Shalini and doing what you are doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mummy. So I'm going to ask Elizabeth. We've got one more question from Elizabeth, and then we're going to go into the breakout sessions. I wanted to say also a huge thank you to Will. Will, please stay with us for a little bit. I know Ralph is going to stay. So Elizabeth, do you want to ask your question quickly?
Sure, thank you so much, Shalini. And Will and Ralph, I know know you from before, but also I really want to see what your view is as going forward for the music industry. Do you think we're going to get back to full live performances and festivals? My kids are desperate to go. Or, you know, many artists are doing ticketed productions online and events. And do you think that, you know, there'll be a bit of hybrid, or where do you think it will go?
Okay, so here's an immediate answer for you, Will, if I may just do this. Last week, just 6 days ago in Manchester, the Park Life Festival, which is now an annual event, which wasn't able to be held this last year, sold 172,000 tickets in 75 minutes, organized by Sacha Lord, very, very important manager of Manchester's nighttime economy. That's a very interesting sign of the future. There is an enormous hunger by people in a post-COVID recovery period, like we have now in our unlocked down era. And the big concert promoters, people like Live Nation, 22,000 events a year, or AEG that have the O2 and a number of other big venues, are all planning now for September, October, something. And there is a lot of optimism, certainly in the UK, that the vaccination program will actually allow for people to congregate in larger numbers. In terms of the theatres, and I know Andrew Lloyd Webber has been trying to militate this for the last couple of months. It's been disastrous for theatres, not only in the West End, but across the United Kingdom. And that too is showing signs of potential recovery. The hunger is there, the money is there, people want to go and be entertained.
Now, for me, 2 points quickly to follow on to that. One, I agree and echo the point about pent-up demand. I mean, this is going to bounce back really strong, but 2 points, one retrospective, one future-looking. Retrospectively, one article I published in Billboard, and I'll get Shalini to circulate this with all of her members, was to look at the impact of COVID on Britain's live and recorded business. Now, in that piece, I was able to put an accurate figure on the value of live, thanks to the cooperation of the PRS for Music, who license every live event. That figure is 2.5 billion spend in 2019 on British gig goers going to see concerts. The point being 2.5 billion less than 2.5 billion was spent in 2020, and a fraction of that is going to be spent this year in 2021. That raises all sorts of pertinent questions, like where does that money get spent? You know, who competes for those gig dollars? So we know the value of the business when the world was normal. Is it going to be an even bigger figure when we get back to normal? Looking forward, I think you asked the hybrid question. That's clear. The huge advancements in live streaming, Dua Lipa claiming 5 million fans in a live stream, no articulated lorries, no travel insurance required for that. You know, these are massive achievements. What Billie Eilish did with her live stream event, and what people are doing on Twitch, especially with their own live streaming channels, you know, making money off time spent writing and recording music. You know, they had to do that anyway. Now they're monetizing that act on Twitch. It's clear for me that live streaming is not going to go away when live streaming returns. So the pertinent question we got to tackle with is, how are they going to coexist? Are you going to get 5 million fans backstage live streaming Billie Eilish before she goes on stage to 50,000 in the muddy field? It could be a balance of the two.
Okay, that sounds great. And I think also you're quite right, because of the touring issues and that still need to be ironed out. And that makes a massive point. Problem. Thank you. That's great.
Will, thank you very much. I'm sorry, everyone, we're running over time. It's such an interesting conversation. I've learned a huge amount from Will and also Lord Vaizey, and Ralph, you've asked some fantastic questions. I'm sorry that our time is up in terms of this interaction, but I was speaking to Will earlier this morning, and perhaps when we can go for the live or hybrid later on this year, we will ask you back and look forward to shaking hands and meeting you. And I'm encouraging everyone. I've been reading his book. It is impressive. There's so much to learn. So if you haven't got a copy, please do go for the Tarzan Economics. And I would strongly recommend Easter reading. I know that Fareed and his team, they're looking at our reading list for the weekend, and we're putting together our sort of preferred list from our members. So if anybody wants to shoot us an email and say which books to read, please do let us know. And if you've read Tarzan Economics already, give us your view. So it's officially launching on the 1st of April, but we can buy it now, can't we, Will?
Yeah, and I'm hearing people are getting it in their mailboxes this morning. So, you know, we're beating the April Fool's Day conundrum there.
And Rishi Sunak asked for 2 copies very recently, so he may be using that in his next budget. So we better read it carefully, read Tarzan Economics carefully.
I'm on Rishi's dishes, apparently.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move over to the breakout sessions, and really the idea is with the breakout session is that you meet a smaller group of people, you get to know each other. Please assign somebody to moderate and just talk about yourself very, very briefly, and then talk about one challenge. And the idea is to brainstorm in small groups one challenge. Then we'll bring everyone back in about just before 7:30 to do an official thanks and closing. So I'm ask Fareed, if you wouldn't mind, to do the method where we kind of like in, I guess in Star Wars, go into a different room very, very quickly. So if you'd like to stay, we'd encourage you to stay. And I just want to make sure that Richard Morris is there and to say thank you to Richard, because without IWG support, we wouldn't be able to run a lot of these events. So thank you also to Richard Morris and IWG, but we'll come back. So over to the breakout rooms. Hopefully it'll work. Thank you.
Hey, Peter, Richard, and John, are you guys interested in joining various rooms? If you are, just let me know and I can try and assign you to one of the rooms.
I'm not in a room.
Yeah, so I'm just looking to see why it won't put you in a.
It went in, then it went out. I was in a room, then it went out. Room 7,
Yeah,
then went out.
For some reason, it says Frank Lewis not joined. Would it be possible for you to just log back out and log back in once for me? Then I can.
How do I do that?
Just close this meeting and rejoin it, and I will admit you back into the room. It might be a problem that it's not recognizing you. For some reason, it just says not joined, sadly. And the same applies for Richard Morris.
Yeah, do I have to leave? Do I say leave, press leave?
Yeah, you leave the meeting, and then you just come back. You click on the link again to rejoin, just like you entered the first time. Richard, Peter, and John, I would ask that you probably do the same because there's a problem with your login. If you could log out and then log back in, I can assign you to a room. Peter, I'm not sure if you can hear me. John Hayes, I think you're on mute.
Hello? Hello. Hello. Hello.
What happened, Frank? Did it kick you out again?
No, yeah, I don't know what's going on. I'm back.
You're back. Let's try one more time. Let me try
Okay.
one more time. What I will do is I will go and look at the breakout rooms. It says Frank Lewis not joined. This is the problem.
Why?
Yeah,
I wasn't.
it's got some issues. I think this is a Zoom problem, not a NUS problem. So, well, I'm very happy to talk to you, Frank, if you'll have me. So
Sure.
maybe this can be our room, and Jennifer, myself, you, and Peter and Richard can have a conversation if people are comfortable unmuting. But I'm very happy to have a chat. Tell me about yourself, Frank. What industry are you in, and what are you working on?
Well, what I do for the last 50 years, I serve as a chairman, non-exec director for companies.
Oh, wonderful.
And I've been listed 8 companies on the AIM market as a chairman NED. And that's what I do today.
Incredible.
And I've been involved in all over the world. I've been chairman of companies in China, Africa,
wow.
Yeah, Eastern Europe. I'm currently involved in a large real estate company in Ukraine.
Oh,
and I'm an expert on AIM and corporate governance and all the usual stuff. And anybody needs a good chairman or NED, I'm looking for 1 or 2 more opportunities.
How amazing. Well, it sounds like you've got your hands full with all the different opportunities, but we'll definitely keep
I've only got one that I got rid of the others, and now then Brexit came and COVID, so looking to replace what I had and start again in a way.
Understand.
I'm originally from South Africa.
Oh, no way. Okay, I spent some time working in South Africa. I was working in Sandton.
Okay, I'm from Cape Town originally.
What a beautiful, beautiful place.
Yeah.
Stunning beauty. I remember my wife and I were driving out towards the Cape, and we sort of just had a look around us when we were driving down the road, and we couldn't believe where we were. We just didn't understand it.
Yeah.
Your impression of Africa is so different, and then there we were driving on this amazing highway, and it just looked like you were in Switzerland or something. It's beautiful.
Cape Town is very special also. It's the most beautiful city in the world.
It really is gorgeous. I mean, the Table Mountain and
yes.
Wow. And I think seeing the penguins on the beach was just a
yes.
So fantastic. And I think what shocked me was seeing an ostrich on the beach. I remember
ostrich. I don't remember. The ostriches come from Oudtshoorn, a different part of the world, further up north.
so what was shocking to me was, and I took a picture of it just because I couldn't believe it, is this is right when we were in the Cape and we were close to the water, and there was an ostrich that was actually, I don't know whether it was an emu or an ostrich, but it was a big bird that was right on literally close to the rocks. And I just didn't understand it.
I've never seen an ostrich that part of the world.
Never seen that before. Anyway, it was only my first trip to South Africa, so I was just like,
yes.
I don't know, maybe it's a thing over here.
I don't know.
Anyway, but what a beautiful country you come from. It's quite a place. How long
Absolutely.
have you been in the UK then?
Sorry?
How long have you been in the UK?
25 years.
Okay, wonderful. So this is home.
This is home. I live in North London.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're down in Putney.
Okay.
So you used to be in Battersea for a while, and then sort of came over here.
Right.
So, yeah, and I run a few different ventures. We typically invest in very young companies, and sometimes also take sort of some equity stakes in exchange for doing technology work. We're technologists, most of us.
Yeah. I'm a qualified accountant. I've never practiced, but I've run businesses. I've also run tech businesses. Techies don't know really how to run a business. They know how to be techies.
Yeah.
And I've
Yeah.
and I've taken two techie business from startup to listing myself, and I've got all that. So if anybody needs a guy like me around to help them grow their businesses, I'm available.
That's great. That's great advice. One of the ones that we're working on is in the air quality space. So it's monitors and sensors that are doing,
Zero carbon ESG stuff.
It's ESG stuff. It's focused on sensing and understanding, sort of indoor air quality. And outdoor air quality, because there's so many problems, respiratory problems that come up as a result of those things. We're trying to solve for that. But fascinating space. And my co-founder, he was out at MIT, so a very, very, very clever guy. So there's a mechanical and electrical, and I'm the chemical engineer. So
very good, very good.
But good fun.
Nice.
We just completed one of our pilots in Bangalore, and now we're starting our pilot in the UK. So, and then the next step is really to start to sell into municipalities and that sort of thing. So exciting times for us. Very early, but
yeah, sure. But you got to start somewhere and grow. And as long as you got the finance behind you, and you're managing your cash flow, which is vital in a small business, and you're growing up in steps because you need to manage your working capital, then you can do okay. Provided you got the market.
The best advice I ever got was from one of my engineering professors. His name was Professor Joseph Parody. He was a Hungarian immigrant to Canada, and he electronized a lot of the banking systems in Canada in the early days. And he told me, he said, Farid, when you finish up with your engineering degree, make sure you go and get some business education. And so I did that. And
good.
I studied managerial finance and managerial accounting, and I got to say that was probably the best thing I could. It taught me how to run a business. And
absolutely.
Otherwise, engineers are, I must say, we were to complete loss.
Cash is king.
Cash is king. Wow. And there's so many people just run out of it. It's amazing.
Yeah. People don't understand that that is the need and the requirement, and so you've got to grow your business according to your cash flow and build it in steps and provide it. It all needs to monitor on a monthly basis and forecast your cash. Otherwise, you're going to go bust, especially startups. And if you
quite right. And I think the startup, the whole mentality right now, just like growth at all costs, I think is a dangerous one.
It is. No, when I first came to this country, I took an interactive TV company. I took 500,000 from a private equity group, and turned it to 150 million in 6 months.
Ooh, that's fantastic. I'm working with one company which is impressive. They're VPN in the VPN space, plus 100 million turnover, and advising them in a similar way, because I think it's fascinating what's going on.
Yeah. Well, as soon as we come out of COVID, we see what's going to be interesting to see the pent up demand and see what happens. But as I said earlier, the workings are going to change. People, but a lot of the stuff that from the digitalization, what happened with the lockdown, is going to still permeate its way through and be utilized in businesses, because I think a lot has been learned on how business should be run.
Indeed, I think as the expression goes, the tide's gone out, and a lot of people have been caught swimming with their trunks off. So
who said that? You know who said that?
I wish I knew who said that.
The guy who said that is I just forgotten his name, but he said when the tide goes out, you can see who's naked in a way, and he's the guy who had he's the biggest private equity guy in America, oldish guy today. And he's made billions investing in various companies. I've just forgotten his name for a moment. That's where it comes from.
Incredible. I think it's not. We're not talking about the sage of Omaha. We're not.
Yes.
Okay, so
what's his name again? I just forgotten his name.
Warren
Buffett said that.
Oh, did he really? Okay,
absolutely.
It sounded like I was like, it can't be. But
no, Warren Buffett said that.
Wow. Yeah. So it sounds. I mean, I love everything about what he does, and it's just incredible.
Yes.
I also like Ray Dalio a lot. I read a lot of his stuff, and
I don't know him.
He's a hedge fund manager who published some thoughts around something called Principles, which I loved. It's a great book, and he sort of made it illustrated and animated, so he made it very accessible to people.
If you're interested, you should have a look at my website.
Yeah, sure. What is it?
franklewis.co.uk. Can you see it from where you are?
I'm just going onto it right now.
I'll show you a few things there.
franklewis.co.uk. I'm on it. Yeah.
Am I looking at you? If you go to publication, click on the publication section.
Yes, I'm there.
You'll see there's 2 TV interviews.
Oh yes, I see it.
And a lot of articles have been written about me, and magazines written about me, and Sunday Times, and
wow,
Voice of America, a lot of stuff out there, a lot of chairman, non-execs, how to run a business, and all that stuff.
You have some incredible coverage there. I'm just looking at your biography and your profile.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff, and it's great that you've got everything out on the website. So have you ever been involved in are you looking at all of these SPAC deals that are happening? What do you think?
Well, the SPAC deal is very interesting, especially in America. It's a totally way of different from the UK. And in the first 4 months of this year, SPACs in America did $80 billion. But it's a way of running differently. Yeah, the SPAC, a special acquisition vehicle, is very much smaller, and it was set up for on is called the standard market, part of the main market of the stock exchange, where you can take a small invest 2 million, and people then reverse into it, and the rules are different in the sense of how it's got to be run, and you need a 700,000 share capital and 25% free float of people in Europe and all that. So, but they're going to change it. But the SPACs are mainly in America has gone crazy.
It's completely crazy. It's completely crazy. The deals aren't even making sense anymore.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of very poor quality assets in the SPACs, and eventually it's going to catch up with them.
Yes. I mean, some of these companies, like if you saw the last couple of months, 2 months, the big company called Hut did a listing in the SPAC, and another one did a SPAC because they wanted to split voting rights of the shares and all that funny things, and which is not normal in the normal listing here.
Fascinating. And what's interesting is, I mean, I guess the UK used to have SPACs, right? Like, I mean, they still have the structure.
It's a shell. They call it a shell.
Yes, but it's been like, I don't know. I guess the Americans have somehow found a way to make a sensation out of it.
Yeah, of course. But a SPAC is equivalent in London to a cash shell, is the name, you know.
I see.
Where you have cash in it and you reverse an asset into it and you list it.
And that doesn't seem to happen so much here. Is it because of some regulatory issues?
Yeah, that's different in terms of regulation. You need a admission document, a prospectus. Once you've done it, and revert and then start again, and have to. But it's starting to take off again slightly more here at the moment, I believe.
Oh, I'm sure.
But it's a different rules to American way of doing it.
Interesting. I guess some of that SPAC halo must be coming over to the UK as well, right?
Yeah.
And were you also ever involved in any of the ICO stuff that happened, the craziness, the madness of the crypto, sort of
cryptocurrency, the initial blockchain?
The initial coin offerings, which happened.
No.
That was just completely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these little bubbles. I mean, like, I think that are floating around. Some people have leveraged them and made a lot of money in the process.
Sure. Yeah, first people in it make a lot of money, then it becomes levels off, and etc., and goes down a bit. And you just got to be right. Timing is very important.
Time's critical. Someone said something really interesting. He was the guy who was the first product manager for AWS, Dave Chappelle. He said to me, he was one of our mentors in a program I was going through, because we had run a financial services business, and Morgan Stanley was the investor. And I remember he said to me, he's like, Fareed, being early is the same as being late, as being wrong. I was like, I'll never forget that. That's so true.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So interesting, because if you're educating the market and if you're spending all that money trying to build the market, it's sometimes very difficult, I think, to do that. So
yeah,
I'm going to just close all the rooms and
get
ready. I'm just giving them 60 seconds to wrap up, because
anyway, nice to talk to you.
Oh, such a pleasure, Frank. And I'm definitely going to look at your website a little bit.
If I can help in any way, you got any people I can go, I'm available.
Thank you so much, sir. It's very much appreciated.
Good. Be well. Have a good day and have a good week.
And you. I wonder what happened with Peter and Paul. I think maybe they just, like us, were never allocated to anything. So let's see what happens.
Are you based in London, Farid?
I am very much. Yes, we're in Putney, so not so.
Yes, you're in Putney. Yeah, I'm in North London.
You're in North. I'm in Southwest. So
yes, Barnet area.
Our office used to be in Shoreditch, so I used to do.
Yes.
It was a long haul. I used to go like an hour, 15 minutes from here there every day. I each way. So that was like 2.5 hours of just commute
on the tube.
Yeah, on the tube. So now I'd much rather just get one of Richard's offices than go.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense. Okay. So
okay.
Everybody's back.
So we off now, or how does it work?
Yeah, so I think we're just going to wait for Shalini. Just a few words. There she is, and I'm just going to put her on the spotlight. There we are.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I know that some people would have been in mid-flow in their conversation. So if you want to be connected to your group, if you drop myself or Dana or any of the team a line, we will connect you to your group. We hope you found it informative. I know I've learned a huge amount this evening, and that's because I think we had some inspirational, as I said in the beginning, formidable speakers. So Will, I can see you. I just want to say a massive thank you. I'm learning from not just your book, but meeting you today. Ralph, as I mentioned earlier, you asked some fabulous questions. It was great to have you on board. And obviously, Lord Vaizey has left us. But we would love your feedback. We would love your feedback into what more we should be doing to support the community. So please do keep talking to us. The other thing I'd say is on the 26th of April is going to be our next big event. And that is with two gentlemen who've also written a book, but they were the leaders who helped Jeff Bezos build Amazon. His former chief of staff and one of his business leaders who were both of them were there for a period of around 15 years each. So that's going to be 26th of April. So put that date in your diary. In the interim, if you're looking for access to finance, looking for mentors, NEDs, talking to people within our community about any of your challenges, please do drop us a line. And I'd like to say thank you to my team and also to Farid and Randall for all of their great support in making this happen. And without them, as we were saying, it's the team that makes you. And for me, it's the team that makes this business work. So thank you to you all. And wish you a great Easter. Have a break. Send us your book recommendations and read Tarzan Economics. That's on my list.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. See you. Bye, everyone. Have a nice evening. Thank you. Thanks, Ralph. Thank you, Will.
Thank you so much, Ralph. Thank you, Will. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, Shalini.